It started with a simple question from a little girl. "Daddy, can we help her?" What followed would shake an entire town, expose a hidden war between billionaires, and transform a quiet single-dad veteran into the heart of a national movement. One act of courage in a small-town diner set off a ripple effect that reached corporate boardrooms, criminal empires, and the hearts of thousands. And it all began with kindness. And 3 unexpected Rolls-Royce arrivals the next morning. The soft hum of a jukebox blended with the gentle clatter of forks and ceramic mugs. Maple Diner, a cozy roadside spot nestled between a tire shop and a closed antique store, glowed warm under its vintage neon sign. Maple D buzzed intermittently the eye, flickering in and out like a tired heartbeat. Adam Walker sat in the red leather booth closest to the window, a steaming mug of black coffee in front of him, and across the table, his 4-year-old daughter Clara sat with her legs swinging freely above the floor. She wore her favorite yellow overalls dotted with oil smudges from earlier when she insisted on helping Daddy fix the truck. The scent of maple syrup and sizzling bacon hung in the air. Clara was busy lining up sugar packets like toy soldiers, her little brow furrowed in concentration. Adam couldn't help but smile. These Friday nights had become their tradition, the reward after a long week of greasy knuckles and aching joints from working at the small garage he owned on the edge of town. For him, it was a breath of peace. For Clara, it was magic, chocolate chip pancakes, whipped cream mustaches, and a waitress named Maggie who called her darlin' and snuck her extra marshmallows in her cocoa. The bell above the door jingled, and Adam instinctively glanced up. Old habits from his Marine days still flickered like embers in the back of his mind. 3 men stepped in. Something about them didn't fit the rhythm of the place. Leather jackets, one with a torn sleeve, another with a faded snake tattoo slithering up his neck. They didn't sit. They scanned the room with eyes too sharp for comfort. Adam's gaze narrowed, but he quickly turned back to Clara, not wanting to startle her. She was now trying to build a tower from tiny creamer cups. "Hey, Daddy," she said suddenly without looking up. "Do you think stars can see us from up there?" Adam chuckled. "I think they can, baby." Clara nodded solemnly. "Then I hope Mommy's star is really bright tonight." His smile faltered just a breath. He reached across the table and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Me too." Maggie arrived with their food, setting down a short stack of pancakes for Clara and a plate of hash and eggs for Adam. "Your usual," she said with a wink. "And don't worry." I slipped her extra syrup. "Thanks, Maggie," Adam said warmly. The men stood at the counter, now speaking to the cashier in low tones. One of them leaned too close. Adam noticed it. So did Maggie. Her smile faded. Outside, a cold wind swept leaves down the sidewalk. Through the window, the town looked peaceful. But inside the diner, tension settled like a draft under the door. Then she entered. A young woman, no more than 25, stepped in hesitantly. She wore a plain blue dress, her dark hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She looked like someone trying not to be seen, eyes darting, posture guarded. Adam didn't know what made him notice her so sharply. Maybe it was the way her hands clutched her purse strap. Maybe it was how she immediately turned to leave only to be intercepted. The 3 men moved fast. One of them blocked the door. Another took a step too close. The last spoke something low that made her flinch. Clara had stopped eating. Her big brown eyes were wide and fixed on the scene. She tugged gently at Adam's sleeve. "Daddy," she whispered. "Daddy, can we help her?" The words soft as they were landed like thunder. Adam looked at his daughter. The little girl who believed stars could see her, who believed pancakes were sacred, who believed in kindness because he had taught her that the world, though often broken, could still be beautiful. He turned back toward the 3 men. Time slowed. His heart beat steady, not fast, not fearful but focused. For years he had left behind the uniform, the noise, the violence. He had chosen a quiet life for Clara. But something stirred now. Not rage, not pride. Purpose. He rose from the booth. The vinyl seat let out a small hiss of air, as if the very air around him recognized the shift. Clara watched silently, hands now, still her fork, dropped unnoticed. Adam Walker, former Marine Sergeant mechanic by trade father, by calling, walked slowly toward the door where 3 wolves had cornered a lamb. The diner hushed. The only sound was the low hum of the jukebox in the corner, playing an old Patsy Cline tune about walking after midnight. Adam didn't speak yet. He stopped a few feet away, standing between the girl and the men, now his eyes calm, voice quiet, but edged with steel. "She doesn't want trouble," he said. The man with the snake tattoo smirked. "Ain't looking for trouble, Pops. We're just talking. You should mind your own pancakes." Adam didn't blink. "My daughter asked me a question. I intend to answer it." The air changed. Snake tattoo reached toward his waistband, but froze as Adam's hand moved first. Not for a weapon. He simply adjusted his stance. Feet apart. Balanced. The kind of stance you only learn from years in combat zones. The girl behind him whispered, "Please." That did it. Adam's voice dropped even lower. "You're going to walk out of here now, all 3 of you, and you're going to forget you ever saw her." The silence was louder than any shout. Then slowly, one of the men backed away. The second followed with a curse. Snake tattoo glared, but Adam didn't flinch. Finally, he spat on the ground and stormed out. The bell above the door jingled again, and just like that, the danger passed. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the young woman exhaled, trembling. "Thank you," she whispered. Her voice cracked. Adam nodded once. Then, without another word, he turned back toward Clara. She looked up at him with eyes shining like her mother's. "Daddy," she said quietly. "You're my hero." He didn't reply, just ruffled her hair, sat down, and picked up his fork. But he knew deep down everything had just changed. The snow had started falling by the time Adam tucked Clara into bed that night. Their small cabin sat at the edge of Maple Ridge, backed by quiet woods, and fronted by a gravel drive leading to his modest auto shop. Warm light glowed from the front porch lantern, casting long shadows across the porch swing Clara loved to nap on in the summer. Inside, the world was safe. Still. But in Adam's chest, the storm had already begun. He stood in the hallway, hand braced against the doorframe, watching Clara sleep. She had curled into her blanket, hugging her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Buttons. Her breath was slow, and even her brow relaxed, a picture of peace. But the question she'd asked, just 6 simple words, echoed louder than any war cry he'd heard in combat. "Daddy, can we help her?" It hadn't been a plea. It was a statement of belief in him, in the world he had tried so hard to build for her, a world where kindness mattered, where right and wrong still held their lines. And when he looked at her in that diner, so small and so sure, he knew he didn't have the luxury of staying on the sidelines anymore. He had taught Clara to be brave, not by yelling, not by preaching, but by showing up, fixing what was broken, listening more than speaking. But sometimes being brave meant standing up even when you'd rather disappear. The next morning broke cold and sharp. Frost kissed the edges of the garage windows as Adam flipped the sign to open. The air smelled of gasoline and pine, and the sound of distant crows echoed over the trees. He poured himself a cup of weak diner-style coffee and checked the schedule. Just 2 oil changes and a busted alternator. A quiet day. Or so he thought. The rumble came first. Deep, even, powerful, not the sputter of an old pickup or the whine of a rusted sedan. This was something else. 3 Rolls-Royce Phantoms pulled slowly into the gravel lot, their polished black exteriors gleaming even in the pale morning sun. The contrast was so stark, it almost looked like a mirage luxury amidst the dust and snow and cracked concrete. Adam put down the coffee, wiping his hands on a rag. The first car's door opened, and out stepped the woman from the diner. But today she was a different person entirely. Gone was the nervous girl in the blue dress. In her place stood a woman in a snow-white pantsuit, tailored to perfection. Her dark hair was pinned neatly at her neck, and diamond studs shimmered just beneath her ears. She radiated calm confidence and power. Adam blinked. Even Clara, who had followed him out in her puffy coat and rainbow rain boots, whispered, "Is she a princess?" The woman's eyes softened at the sight of the child. "No, sweetheart," she said with a smile. "Not a princess, just someone very grateful." Adam stepped forward slowly. "You clean up nice," he said evenly. She laughed, a clear, effortless sound that danced in the cold air. "And you're just as direct as I remember." "I like that. I take it this isn't about a flat tire." "No," she said, extending a hand. "I'm Evelyn Hart. My family owns Hart Motors." Adam didn't shake her hand right away. The name rang familiar. Hart Motors wasn't just any company. It was the third largest luxury automotive group on the East Coast. Prestigious, powerful, and very far from Maple Ridge. Evelyn let her hand fall, sensing his caution. "I didn't tell you who I was last night, because I didn't want anyone to treat me differently. But what you did, what your daughter reminded you to do, meant more than I can say. I just did what anyone should have done," Adam replied, his tone flat, but not cold. "That's where you're wrong," Evelyn said, meeting his eyes. "Very few people would have stood up, even fewer with a child sitting beside them." He paused. "Why are you here?" he asked finally. "To say thank you," she said. "Properly. And 3 Rolls-Royce are required for that." Evelyn smiled again, but this time it didn't reach her eyes. "They're not for show. I'm under surveillance. The men you saw last night, they work for a rival company. I'm in the middle of a legal and business war. And last night, I walked into a trap." Adam's jaw clenched. "They were trying to intimidate me," she continued, "force me to back out of a deal that would bring a manufacturing plant to this region. Jobs, training programs, it's a big move, and not everyone wants it to succeed. And you came here to offer me a job. I came here to ask if you'd be willing to partner with us," Evelyn said. "I need service partners across the region, reliable local mechanics, people with integrity." He stared at her, blinking against the cold wind and the sheer audacity of the moment. "I'm a small-town grease monkey with a 4-year-old in a 2-lift garage, and I'm a CEO with 3 cars and a debt of gratitude," she said gently. "Don't sell yourself short." Behind him, Clara tugged at his hand. "Can we help more people, Daddy?" she asked, her voice light but curious. Evelyn's smile turned wistful. "Smart girl." Adam looked between them, his daughter's trusting eyes, Evelyn's poised calm, and felt something shift in him. An old part of himself stirring. Not the soldier, not the mechanic, the man who once believed he could build something better. "Let me think about it," he said at last. "Of course," Evelyn replied, "but I'll be back tomorrow, and I'd love to bring you both to Heart HQ just to see what this could mean." She turned to leave her heels crunching lightly in the gravel. The 3 phantoms pulled away one after the other, disappearing down the snowy road, like black swans fading into mist. Adam stood still for a long moment. Clara slipped her hand into his. "Was that the girl from the diner?" she asked. "Yeah," he said, voice soft. "But she's more than I thought." Clara nodded sagely. "I think you're more than you think too, Daddy." Adam smiled, eyes glistening just a little. "Yeah, kiddo. Maybe." Adam Walker had always known how to read a room. In war, it had saved lives. In the garage, it helped him tell when a client was bluffing about how long their check engine light had been on. But that night at the diner, he hadn't needed to read the room. He had felt it, like a pressure drop before a storm. Now, a full day later, he sat alone at his workbench, oil-stained hands, idle, staring blankly at a disassembled carburetor he'd rebuilt a dozen times over. The gentle click of the wall clock was the only sound, and even that seemed loud in the stillness. He should have been exhausted. The garage had been busy. Evelyn's visit had turned everything upside down. Clara had spent the afternoon drawing race cars and asking if Miss Evelyn could come back for pancakes. But Adam's mind was back in that booth, in that moment, hearing his daughter's voice just before everything shifted. "Daddy, can we help her?" He hadn't expected to stand. He hadn't planned to act. The Marine inside him, buried under years of grease and grief, had simply stepped forward like an old friend who hadn't forgotten his post. And when he did, the room had changed. He remembered the exact way each of the three men looked at him. Not with fear, but with recognition. A knowing. A measure of caution only shown to those who had seen the same darkness they trafficked in. And he hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't needed to. He had learned long ago that strength didn't come from volume. It came from certainty, stillness, and the willingness to stand between danger and the innocent no matter what it cost. The sound of the front door creaking open brought him back. He looked up. Evelyn Hart stepped into the garage this time without the entourage or the armored vehicles. Just her. A fitted gray trench coat. Boots that clicked softly on the concrete. Hair pulled back in a low twist. She looked normal. Elegant, but quieter somehow. Adam stood and wiped his hands with a cloth. "You're early," he said. She glanced at the dusty clock. 15 minutes. I was curious if punctuality still mattered in a place like this. "It does," he said. "Just not as much as trust." Evelyn nodded. "Good answer." He gestured toward a folding chair near the workbench. She sat without hesitation, crossing her legs. He noticed the faint crease between her brows. Less polished than yesterday. More human. "You look tired," he said, not unkindly. She gave a quiet laugh. "You try negotiating with board members while dodging corporate espionage and hiding bruises from security threats." Adam didn't smile. "I have, actually. Just in a different uniform." They sat in silence for a beat. "I looked you up," she said, finally. "Adam Walker. Honorable discharge. Marine Sergeant. Served 3 tours. Lost your wife 3 years ago to cancer. Moved here to raise your daughter alone. Opened this garage with your military pension." He didn't flinch. And I realized I was right. About what you don't belong here. He turned slowly. "I chose to be here." Evelyn's voice softened. "I don't mean it as an insult. I mean that your life has outgrown this garage, whether you see it or not." Adam looked around, at the dented toolbox, the faded calendar, the wall of photos, Clara's drawings taped beside pictures of his unit from another lifetime. "I don't need more," he said simply. Evelyn leaned forward. "Maybe not for you. But what about for her? That hit. Not like a punch. More like a ripple spreading through calm water." He said nothing. She continued. "This isn't just about a business proposal, Adam. I want your garage to become a hub part of a regional network of service centers for Hart Motors. But more than that, I want to use this partnership to launch a veteran job program. I want you to help me lead it." He blinked. "You want me to run a corporate veterans initiative. I want someone who knows what it means to serve, who doesn't just talk about loyalty but lives it." Adam leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. "You don't know me." "I know enough," she said gently. "You put yourself between me and danger, without knowing who I was. That's the kind of person I want building something with me." Silence fell again, heavier this time. He thought of Clara, of the way her small hand fit into his, of her laugh, her trust. He thought of the men at the diner and how easy it had been for them to threaten someone who was simply trying to build something better, and he thought of Evelyn, how behind the calm exterior he could now see something else, weariness, grit, and an odd flicker of hope. "I don't want to be anyone's hero," he said quietly. "Good," Evelyn replied, "because I don't need a hero. I need a partner." He looked at her, then really looked, past the polished image, past the press releases and company logos. She wasn't some cold CEO. She was a woman trying to make something good in a world that often rewarded the opposite. And for the first time, Adam let himself consider the idea that maybe, just maybe, his quiet life wasn't the finish line. Maybe it was the starting point. Later that night, after Evelyn had gone, Adam sat with Clara in the backyard, wrapped in blankets under a sky full of stars. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Daddy, yes, sweetheart. Are we gonna help her again?" Adam stared at the night sky, the stars clear and sharp above them. "Yes," he said softly. "I think we are." Clara smiled, eyes drifting closed, and for the first time in years, Adam Walker didn't feel like he was leaving something behind. He felt like he was walking toward something. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight filtered through the blinds in stripes, cutting across the kitchen table, where Clara sat, swinging her legs and coloring on a flattened cereal box. Adam stood at the counter, brewing a fresh pot of coffee, while the local radio played softly, the DJ's voice easy and familiar, like an old friend, chatting about snowfall predictions and high school football scores. Clara looked up. "Daddy, can I bring Miss Evelyn one of my drawings today?" Adam raised an eyebrow. "You planning on becoming her new designer?" Clara giggled. "No, I just want her to have something happy." He smiled, pouring her a glass of orange juice. "Then pick your best one." She held up a picture of a giant purple car with stars for wheels and a smiling stick figure behind the wheel. "This one." "It's called Starlight Racer." "Perfect," Adam said. "Tell her it's a limited edition." The two of them shared a quiet breakfast, the kind that had become sacred in their little world, full of unspoken comfort and the rhythm of healing. Adam never rushed mornings. He knew how fragile peace was and how long it took to build it back after war, after loss, after love was gone. But today something tugged at the edges of that peace. By 9 a.m., Adam was in the garage, tightening the serpentine belt on an old F-150, while Clara sat on the workbench, humming to herself. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted the morning air, and Adam stood upright, wiping sweat from his brow with the edge of his sleeve. A sleek white town car rolled up, not flashy like the Rolls-Royces from before, but polished, deliberate. The back door opened, and for the second time in 2 days, Evelyn Hart stepped into his life. But this time, she wasn't alone. A man followed behind her, tall, trim, dressed in a navy coat, polished shoes, and a watch that cost more than Adam's entire toolkit. His smile was tight, too perfect. Adam's jaw flexed. "Mr. Walker," Evelyn said, nodding warmly. "This is Jonathan Crest, my company's legal advisor and head of risk management." Crest extended a hand. "Mr. Walker." "A pleasure." Adam shook it firm, brief, non-committal. "What brings you both to the shop?" he asked, glancing at Evelyn. Evelyn looked poised, but her voice had a hint of tension. "I wanted to walk you through the preliminary partnership documents and give you a tour of the regional facility. Thought it would be better in person." "And Jonathan?" Adam asked. She hesitated. "Insists on being thorough." Jonathan smiled again, but this time it was colder. Standard protocol when dealing with sensitive expansion plans. "Miss Hart's safety and the company's reputation are our top priorities." Adam felt something twist in his gut. He didn't like the man, not because he wore money like armor, Not even because he spoke with the smooth detachment of someone who had never changed a tire in his life. No, Adam didn't like him because his instincts, the ones that had saved him in combat zones and back alleys, were screaming that this man wasn't just a lawyer. He was a handler. And Evelyn, she looked like someone used to being handled. Still, Adam didn't react. He simply gestured toward the small office attached to the garage. "We can talk in there." Clara slipped off the workbench, trotting toward Evelyn. "I made this for you." Evelyn knelt down as Clara handed her the Starlight Racer drawing. Her face softened instantly. "It's beautiful." "It's the fastest car ever," Clara whispered, as if it were a secret. "But only nice people can drive it." Adam caught the subtle glance Evelyn gave Jonathan. He saw it a flicker of something unspoken resistance, maybe, or apology. Jonathan remained outside the office, clearly uninterested in small talk or children's artwork. Instead, he pulled out his phone and turned slightly away, speaking into it with hushed intensity. Inside, Adam flipped through the partnership documents. They were well-prepared, clean percentages, smart logistics, generous terms. Almost too generous. "You wrote this?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "I did. The corporate lawyers will add layers later, but I wanted you to see the heart of it first, before it got complicated." Adam tapped a section. Veteran Training Program. She leaned forward, her voice softer. "It's real. I've been trying to build something like this for years, a network of service centers that aren't just about cars, but about people. Skill building. Second chances. You're the first person I've met who I actually trust to start it right." Adam studied her. "Then why bring him?" She hesitated. "Because trust doesn't scale. And in my world, everything is watched." Adam nodded slowly. "I'm not a liability, but I don't play political games either." Evelyn exhaled. "I'm counting on that." Their eyes met across the desk. Something passed between them, not romance, not yet, but recognition. A quiet understanding that they were both trying to build something honest in a world addicted to masks. Suddenly the door burst open. Jonathan stepped in, expression sharp. "We need to go. Now." Evelyn stood immediately. "What's wrong?" "There's been a breach," he said. "Back at headquarters. Someone accessed your personal files." Evelyn paled. Jonathan turned to Adam. "Don't worry, Mr. Walker. Just corporate security nonsense. We'll handle it." He started to usher Evelyn out, but she paused, turning back to Adam. "I still want you to see the facility," she said. "Tomorrow," Adam nodded. "I'll be ready." Clara waved from the corner. "Bye, Miss Evelyn. Drive the racer safe." Evelyn smiled, this time genuinely, and followed Jonathan out. As the car disappeared down the road, Adam watched the dust settle. Something had changed. Evelyn was clearly in deeper trouble than she let on. And Jonathan Crest wasn't just some lawyer. He was a man used to controlling situations. Adam had spent years following orders. But this time, he wouldn't follow anyone blindly, not even someone as compelling as Evelyn Hart. Not when Clara's voice still echoed in his mind. Only nice people can drive it. The next morning, frost clung to the edges of the windshield like lace. Adam stood in the driveway, brushing snow off his truck, the cold biting through his flannel sleeves. Clara was still inside, finishing her oatmeal and picking out which of her 20 plastic bracelets matched her coat best. He looked up at the sky, pale gray heavy. Snow was coming again. Adam's world had changed twice in as many days, and part of him was still trying to catch up. Not to the money or the opportunity, or even the 3 black Rolls-Royces that had turned his gravel lot into something resembling a movie scene. No, what stuck with him was Evelyn, not the way she looked, though there was no denying she carried a certain impossible elegance, but the way she spoke. There was steel beneath her composure, a woman who had learned how to wear calm like armor. And now he couldn't shake the feeling that whatever she was building, it was more than just business. By mid-morning, Evelyn returned without Jonathan Crest. She pulled up in a silver electric coupe, sleek and quiet, and stepped out in jeans boots and a navy wool coat that made her look almost ordinary. Almost. Clara, who had been helping Adam sort bolts by size, her idea of fun lit up the moment she saw her. "Miss Evelyn." Evelyn knelt just in time to catch the flying hug, laughing as Clara nearly bowled her over. "Someone's got strong muscles. I ate 3 bites of broccoli last night," Clara announced with pride. "Well, then I'd better be careful," Evelyn smiled, rising. Adam wiped his hands and walked over. "You came alone. I figured it was safe," she said. "Unless you're secretly a spy mechanic with a trapdoor under your garage. Only on Thursdays." They shared a quiet smile. Evelyn gestured toward the office. "Can we talk inside?" Adam led the way, gesturing for Clara to stay with her coloring. Inside, the little office still smelled faintly of motor oil and pine-scented cleaner. The heater hummed softly in the corner. Evelyn sat across from him, her posture relaxed, but her eyes sharp. "I need to tell you something," she said, "and I need you to hear it all before you decide anything." Adam nodded, saying nothing. Evelyn took a slow breath. Those men in the diner, they weren't just random thugs. They were sent by an old rival of my father's. Someone who's been trying to buy up every piece of Hart Motors since my father passed. I refused a buyout deal last month, and things have been escalating. Adam's jaw tightened. "I've had break-ins, threats. My legal team's been watching my back, but Jonathan thinks I should step back. Sell. Protect myself." "And you don't?" Adam asked. "No," she said firmly. "Because if I do, everyone we employ, hundreds of families, lose their security. I won't let that happen. I want to move forward with the expansion project, and I want you at the center of it." Adam leaned back, arms crossed. "I'm not corporate," he said. "I know," Evelyn said quickly. "That's why I trust you." He blinked. "I'm not offering you a promotion," she continued. "I'm offering you a partnership. You'd keep your garage, but we'd invest in it, upgrade the equipment, train new techs, turn this into a flagship site for veteran retraining. You'd mentor, oversee operations, get equity, real ownership." Adam was quiet. Then, "Why me? Because you're not after anything," she said. "That's the rarest kind of person in my world." A long silence stretched between them. Outside the window, Clara twirled in the snow, pretending to be a ballerina mechanic, holding a wrench like a magic wand. Adam finally spoke. "You realize if I say yes, I'm pulling myself and her into your fight." Evelyn looked down. "Yes." "And you're still asking?" Evelyn met his gaze. "Because I've seen what you are, Adam. You're a protector, a builder. And I can't do this alone." Adam stood pacing, a little jaw working. His mind darted between possibilities, upgrades, expansion headlines, risk. Then he thought of Clara's voice. Maybe helping more people is right too. He looked at Evelyn. "You're not just talking about wrenches and oil changes." She shook her head. "I'm talking about creating a model that shows the world veterans can rebuild just as fiercely as they once fought." Adam was quiet for a long time. Finally, he extended a hand. "I'll do it," he said. "But we do it my way. Integrity first. No spin." Evelyn stood and shook his hand firmly. "Agreed." Their handshake held. Then Adam added, "And I don't want Jonathan Crest within 10 miles of Clara." Evelyn's expression shifted, surprised but not offended. "Understood." As she turned to leave, Clara ran up and tugged on Adam's sleeve. "Daddy, did you help her again?" He smiled, kneeling to her level. "Yeah, sweetheart. I think I did." Clara looked at Evelyn, then back at her dad. "Good. She's nice. But she's a little lonely." Evelyn blinked, surprised. Adam raised an eyebrow. "That. So," Clara nodded. "She needs a friend. I drew her a second picture. one with 3 people. Evelyn reached out as Clara handed her the new drawing, a simple scene. A tall man, a woman in a coat, and a small girl holding both their hands under a bright yellow sun. "Looks like you made me a family," Evelyn whispered, throat tight. Clara smiled brightly. "Everyone needs one." Adam and Evelyn exchanged a glance, something warm, something unspoken, something new. Outside, the snow began to fall again, but this time it felt like a beginning. Night had fallen over Maple Ridge like a thick quilt, soft, heavy, and quiet. Outside Adam's cabin, the wood stood still under a blanket of fresh snow, and the hum of the heater inside filled the silence like a low lullaby. A small fire crackled in the stone hearth, casting warm shadows that danced across the wooden floors. Clara was fast asleep on the couch, her bunny slippers still on her feet. A picture book about race cars splayed open across her chest. Her hair curled around her cheek like a question mark, and her hand loosely clutched one of her newest masterpieces, a crayon drawing of what she called Daddy's Dream Garage. Adam stood in the kitchen staring at it. In her drawing, the garage was 3 times bigger. Bright. Clean. Full of happy mechanics, one of whom wore a Marine Corps hat like his. There was a swing set off to the side, and in the corner, a sign that read, "Clara's Snack Shack Free Cookies for Heroes." He smiled, but the weight in his chest didn't lift. Evelyn's proposal was still echoing in his head, Equity Expansion Training Program's veteran support. She had laid out the vision with such clarity and heart that it was impossible not to be moved. But Adam knew better than most that visions always came with costs. He stepped out onto the porch with a cup of black coffee and let the cold slap him awake. This garage, this town, it had saved him after Angie passed. When the war inside him hadn't stopped just because he came home, it was these quiet nights and Clara's giggles that pulled him back. Starting over hadn't been about ambition. It had been about survival. Now here he was again standing at another kind of crossroads. One path led to comfort, safety, predictability. The other to something bigger and riskier. He didn't fear change. What he feared was change that would take something away from Clara. Because at the end of it all, she was the only mission that mattered. The next morning, after pancakes and maple syrup, and Clara's very serious request that he wear the red plaid shirt because it makes you look like a boss, Adam took her to the garage early. The lot was quiet, blanketed in snow, but his mind was anything but. By mid-morning, he found himself standing at his workbench, staring at the same carburetor he hadn't finished rebuilding for 2 days. His hands moved automatically, but his heart wasn't in the bolts and valves. His thoughts were on what-ifs. What if this deal went south? What if Evelyn's rivals came after him? What if the quiet life he'd built was a house of cards that would collapse under the weight of ambition? A small voice interrupted his spiral. Daddy Clara stood in the doorway to the office, her hair a little messy, holding a peanut butter sandwich in one hand and her sketch pad in the other. Adam turned. "What's up, sweetheart?" She walked over and climbed onto the stool beside him. "You're being too quiet today," he chuckled. "Sometimes, quiet helps me think." Clara nodded solemnly. "That's what Miss Maggie says before she burns the toast." Adam laughed. "Well, I haven't burned anything yet." She tilted her head. "Are you thinking about Miss Evelyn's big idea?" He paused. "I am." "Are you going to say yes?" He sighed. "I don't know yet." Clara was quiet for a moment. Then she slid her sketch pad over to him. On the new page was a drawing of the 2 of them. He was holding a wrench. She was handing out cookies. Above them was a sign that read, "Helping makes hearts grow." Adam blinked. "Where'd you hear that? I made it up," she said proudly. "It just came out when I was drawing." He looked at her. Really. Looked. The tiny freckles across her nose. The pure trust in her eyes. She didn't care about contracts or revenue or corporate risk. She just cared about people. "Daddy," she said quietly. Helping her was right. Maybe helping more people is right too. He looked down at the sketch again, and for the first time in hours, the tightness in his chest loosened. There would always be risk, always shadows in every new door. But maybe the point wasn't to avoid them forever. Maybe the point was to choose the shadows worth walking through the ones that might lead to light. Adam nodded slowly. "You're right." Clara grinned as if that settled everything. Then serious again. "If we get a bigger garage, can I have my own cookie counter? We'll see," he said, tugging gently at her ponytail. But inside, a decision had already taken root. Not just about the business, about himself. For too long, he had defined safety as hiding from what hurt, from what might go wrong. But maybe real growth, came from doing the hard thing anyway. That night, Adam stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, staring at the man looking back. Not the tired mechanic, not the grieving husband, not even the former Marine, just a father, a builder, a man who still had more to give. He picked up the old dog tag that hung from the nail beside the mirror, worn, scratched but solid, a piece of who he used to be. He wrapped it around his neck again, not as a burden, as a reminder. The phone rang. He answered on the second ring. "Walker." Evelyn's voice came through soft but hopeful. "Is this a bad time?" "Not anymore," he said. "I've made my decision." A beat of silence. Then, "And I'm in," Adam said. "Let's build something worth being proud of." Evelyn exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all day. "You won't regret it." "I'm not doing it for you," he added, but not unkindly. "I'm doing it because my daughter reminded me what kind of man I'm supposed to be." On the other end, Evelyn was quiet, then her voice warmer. "She sounds like the best partner either of us could ask for." "She is," Adam said. Outside, the wind howled softly through the trees, but inside the fire was steady, and the future, though uncertain, no longer felt like something to fear. The following week arrived like the first true morning of spring, crisp, promising, and full of the quiet thrill of something just beginning. Adam stood outside Heart Motors regional headquarters, with Clara on his shoulders, her arms stretched out like airplane wings, as she giggled at the sheer size of the place. The building stood tall and sleek, all glass, and steel glinting in the mid-morning sun. It looked like something from a magazine, too modern for Maple Ridge, too elegant for a man who still used paper invoices and kept his best wrenches in a metal coffee can. But Adam wasn't here to measure comfort. He was here to measure potential. Evelyn met them on the front steps. She wore a tailored black coat over slacks, but this time her hair was loose, falling in soft waves past her shoulders, less executive, more human. Clara immediately reached for her hand. "I brought cookies," Clara said proudly, holding out a brown lunch sack. Evelyn grinned. "Are they from your snack shack?" "Yes," Clara said seriously. "Only heroes get them." Evelyn's smile softened. "Then I'm honored." Adam watched them as they walked inside together, a woman who had inherited an empire, and a girl who ruled with crayons and cookie crumbs. He shook his head slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting. Life had a strange way of pairing unlikely people. The tour began in the main showroom, where a handful of glossy, custom-designed Heart vehicles sat gleaming under pendant lights. Clara immediately pressed her nose to the glass of a cherry-red sports model. "This one goes zoom," she whispered. Evelyn chuckled. "That's the Pegasus. 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds. Adam raised a brow. "Does it come with booster seats?" She laughed. "We can make that happen." From there, they moved into the operations wing, a hive of movement and quiet purpose. Engineers in lab coats adjusted engine specs. Designers clustered around 3D prototypes. Technicians moved silently through the maintenance base, running diagnostics with tablet screens, and gentle precision. It was a far cry from the squeaky creepers and duct-taped toolboxes of Adam's garage. But as he watched a young technician carefully install a timing belt, he noticed something familiar focus. Respect for craft. The unspoken pride in doing a job right the first time. "You've built something solid here," Adam murmured. Evelyn nodded. "It's not just cars, it's people. Many of the folks here are from small towns like yours. Some are second-chance hires. One of our best diagnostics guys was a homeless vet 2 years ago." Adam looked at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. She met his gaze. "It's not about building empires anymore. It's about building bridges." They ended the tour in a bright conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a wooded ridge. Coffee and pastries waited on the table. Clara curled up in the corner chair with her sketchbook, while Adam and Evelyn sat at opposite ends. Evelyn pulled out a folder. "These are the preliminary rollout plans for the first 3 regional service centers. Maple Ridge would be our prototype. We'd expand slowly veterans, first then local youth apprenticeship programs." Adam flipped through the documents. The numbers were clean, the intentions clearer. But one line caught his eye: Heart Foundation Training Oversight Coordinator, Adam Walker. He looked up. "You want me in charge. I want you leading," she said. "Not managing paperwork. I want you shaping it. I want kids to walk into that garage and see someone who knows what purpose looks like, who's lived it." Adam leaned back in his chair, his eyes drifting toward the window. The snow was melting on the ridge, revealing patches of green beneath. Growth. Messy, slow, and inevitable. "I've never done anything like this," he said. Evelyn smiled. "Neither have I. Not like this. But I believe in this. And I believe in you." There was no flattery in her voice, just quiet conviction. The kind that couldn't be faked. Clara patted over and held up her newest drawing. "This is the new garage," she explained. "There's a garden in the back now for people who are sad." Evelyn took the drawing with care, her eyes misting. "That's beautiful." Adam glanced at his daughter. "She's got a heart bigger than her head. She gets it from somewhere." Evelyn said, not looking away. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was full, the kind of silence that only exists when 2 people realize they've crossed an invisible threshold. Not business, not yet. Love. But trust. That evening back at the cabin, Adam sat on the porch steps, his hands calloused and his mind restless. Clara was asleep inside, curled up with Mr. Buttons and dreaming of race cars and garden garages. He looked up at the sky. He'd been taught to see risk, like a soldier identify, assess, neutralize. But now, he saw risk as something else. A bridge, not between enemies, but between what was and what could be. A voice came from the shadows. "You're quieter than usual." He turned. Evelyn stepped into the light holding 2 mugs of coffee. She offered him one. "I wasn't expecting you tonight," he said. "I needed air," she replied, sitting beside him. "And I was already halfway here when I realized I just wanted to talk to someone who doesn't use buzzwords." Adam chuckled. "You're safe here." She sipped. "You ever think maybe people like us aren't meant to stay quiet forever?" He looked at her. "I used to think quiet was safe. But lately, I'm not so sure." She nodded slowly. "Neither am I." Their shoulders brushed slightly in the cold. No promises were made, no grand declarations. Just 2 people, building something, not out of strategy, but out of choice. It started with the phone call. Adam was elbow-deep in the undercarriage of a rusted Chevy Tahoe when the shop's landline rang a sound that had become so rare in the age of smartphones, it made him pause. Clara perched on her usual stool in the corner, with her sketch pad looked up too. He wiped his hands on a rag and crossed the garage. Walkers. No answer, just the sound of static. Then a voice, low, slow, and unfamiliar. "You should have stayed in your lane, Marine." Click! The line went dead. Adam stood still, the receiver pressed to his ear even as the dial tone began to hum. A muscle in his jaw twitched. Clara's voice broke the moment. "Daddy!" He hung up the phone and turned, forcing a smile. "Wrong number, baby." But even as he returned to the Tahoe, a storm had begun brewing behind his calm eyes. By dusk, the storm reached full form. Evelyn arrived in a dark blue SUV with tinted windows and tension in her shoulders. She wore no makeup, her hair pulled back in a hasty knot, and her usual calm was replaced by urgency. "They called you, didn't they?" she asked the moment she stepped inside the office. Adam nodded once. "They called me too," she said. "Threatened to leak confidential company files. Said I was corrupt. Said you were an unstable vet with PTSD. Adam's voice was low, steady. "That all they've got?" "No," she said. "They also know about the facility plans. They know you're heading up the veteran program, and they're trying to break the deal before it gets any real traction." He exhaled through his nose. "Let me guess. Your old rival again." Evelyn nodded. "Derek Roth, son of a steel magnate. Bought out 3 struggling automakers last year and wants Hart Motors next." Adam leaned against the desk, arms crossed. "So he sends thugs to diners, anonymous calls, empty threats." "No," Evelyn said grimly. "They're not empty." She reached into her bag and pulled out a printed photo, grainy and low resolution but clear enough. It was the exterior of Adam's garage, taken from a distance. In the bottom corner of the frame was Clara playing with sidewalk chalk in front of the bay doors. Adam didn't speak, didn't move, but something behind his eyes darkened. "I wanted to warn you," Evelyn said. "Not to scare you, but because you deserve the truth." "Truth is," Adam said slowly, "this is exactly why I left that world. The politics, the games, the threats dressed as business." Evelyn sat down across from him, her hands folded tightly. "And yet, you stepped back into it. For something good." He looked at her. "That's what makes it dangerous. Good things are always the first targets." That night, Adam couldn't sleep. He sat by Clara's bedside watching her chest rise and fall under the quilt. Her fingers clutched Mr. Buttons like a lifeline. The nightlight painted the room in soft gold. He remembered being in Afghanistan, crouched in a village doorway watching a child sleep through mortar fire. The same peace, the same fragility. He had promised himself when he left the service that Clara would never feel fear like that. That he would build a life so safe she'd never know the weight of the world. Now that safety was being challenged, not by bombs, but by ambition. He stood and walked to the front porch, the wood creaking beneath his boots. The cold bit at his skin, but he didn't mind. He needed the clarity of it. He pulled out his old military dog tags from under his shirt and held them in his palm. They were scratched and dulled by time. Symbols of a man who had once fought for something bigger than himself. He had thought he'd left that part behind, but maybe it had only been sleeping. And now it was awake. The next morning, Adam arrived at the garage early. He went straight to the camera system he'd installed himself a year ago, just a simple setup meant to keep an eye on inventory and the front lot. He checked the recordings. At 3:12 a.m., a shadow moved near the garage doors. At 3:13, a figure crouched by the propane tank. At 3:14, the feed cut out. He rewound, replayed. Nothing clear enough to ID the face, but the message was obvious. This wasn't just about intimidation, it was escalation. By noon, Adam had contacted Sheriff Doyle, a former Marine himself, long since retired from active duty, but still sharp, with eyes like a hawk and a handshake like a vice. "I'll file the report," Doyle said after watching the footage. "But you need to know these guys, if they're who I think they are, play dirty. Real dirty. You may be poking a bear." Adam's voice was steady. "Then it's time someone stood up to it." Doyle nodded. "I figured you'd say that. I'll keep extra patrols out this way." As Doyle left, Evelyn pulled up. She stepped out of the car holding a manila folder and a quiet determination. "I brought something," she said. Inside, she spread out blueprints across the workbench. "This is the next phase. Expanded garage bays, veteran classrooms, a welding certification annex. And over here," she pointed to a small square marked C1 Clara's Cookie Shack. Adam raised an eyebrow. "Seriously, she earned it," Evelyn said. "And besides a little sweetness, never hurt a place trying to heal." He looked down at the plans, then up at her. "I'm in," he said. Even after last night, he nodded. Especially after last night. She smiled, a little sad, a little proud. "They're going to come harder now." Adam's voice was quiet. "Then we hold the line." That night, he placed a new sign in the garage window. "Veteran-led, community strong. We're not going anywhere." And beside it, Clara's drawing laminated, colorful, defiant in its innocence. The shadows might be circling, but Adam Walker wasn't the man he used to be. He was more. He was a father, a builder, and now he was a defender of something worth fighting for again. The attack came on a Tuesday night, quiet, moonless, the kind of night where shadows blur into each other and intentions hide beneath silence. Adam had just finished tucking Clara into bed. Her room smelled of lavender from the diffuser she insisted helped keep away bad dreams. He sat with her a while, humming an old lullaby Angie used to sing, his calloused hand gently stroking her hair until her breathing slowed into sleep. He stayed a minute longer listening. Then the world shattered. A boom, not an explosion but something close, rattled the windows and shook the floorboards. The glass on his nightstand trembled and cracked. Adam was on his feet before the sound even registered, adrenaline taking the wheel. He grabbed the baseball bat from the hallway closet out of instinct, more than logic, and rushed to the porch. His garage was on fire. Flames licked up the west wall, like the fingers of some unholy hand. The propane tank hadn't caught, thank God, but something had definitely been ignited near the main storage room. Orange and gold bloomed against the dark sky, casting the surrounding trees in flickering silhouettes. Adam didn't hesitate. He darted toward the building barefoot and shirtless, his breath billowing in sharp puffs of steam as he ran. Snow crunched beneath his feet, melting instantly as he approached the blaze. The side door was ajar, forced open. He scanned quickly, no movement, no intruders. But the fire was spreading fast. He grabbed the emergency extinguisher near the entrance and went to work sweeping the nozzle across the base of the flames, gritting his teeth as smoke stung his eyes. It wasn't enough to stop the fire completely, but it slowed the spread long enough for the local fire department, alerted by an automatic sensor, to arrive 5 minutes later. When it was over, the worst had been avoided. But the message was clear. Next time, they wouldn't be subtle. Clara stood beside him in her pajamas, her small hand clutching his as firefighters doused the last glowing embers. She looked up at him with wide, scared eyes. "Daddy, are we in danger?" Adam knelt beside her, brushing a smudge of soot from her cheek. "Not if I can help it," he said softly. She nodded like she believed him because, to Clara, her father wasn't just a man. He was a mountain. But inside, Adam's heart was thudding with something far deeper than fear. It was resolve. By noon the next day, Evelyn was there. She didn't knock, just walked into the charred garage office like it was her own war zone. Her coat still bore snowflakes. Her face was paler than usual. I saw the news. Adam, crouched beside a scorched workbench, looked up. No one hurt. That's what matters. She crossed her arms. They meant for it to send a message. "Well," Adam said, standing, "I got it." She stared at him for a long moment. "So, what are you going to do?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, He reached over to a whiteboard covered in grease-smudged plans and diagrams and wiped it clean in one firm stroke. "Start over," he said. Evelyn tilted her head. "Start over." "I'm not backing down," he said. "But I'm not just rebuilding this garage. I'm rebuilding what it stands for." He walked to the center of the room, sweeping dust off the concrete with his boot. No more patches, no more quiet fixes. We go public, full rollout. Veteran program. Town hall. Media if we have to. Evelyn blinked. "You want to escalate? I want to expose," Adam said. "Because cowards work in the dark, but truth," he pointed upward. "Truth loves light." Evelyn exhaled a mix of surprise and admiration. "I was ready to tell you to pause everything, that it might be too risky for Clara for the town." Adam looked at her, something steady and electric behind his gaze. That fire wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. She smiled, slow and real. "Then let's accept it together." The next 72 hours passed in a blur. Adam called in favors from a handful of fellow veterans, some he hadn't spoken to in years. One showed up from Ohio with a truck full of tools. Another from Vermont brought welding gear and a six-pack of gratitude. Word spread quickly. Something was happening in Maple Ridge. The townspeople rallied too. Franklin, the local baker, brought pastries every morning for the crew. Diane from the library printed flyers for free. Sheriff Doyle arranged for overnight patrols, no questions asked. Even high school students showed up to help carry supplies and repaint walls. Evelyn returned, daily sleeves rolled up clipboard forgotten. She helped carry lumber. She helped lay wiring. She helped Clara restock her newly refurbished cookie shack with sugar-free options for the seniors. At one point, Adam caught her standing alone in the middle of the garage, gazing at the progress. Her eyes were glossy, but not from the sawdust. "You okay?" he asked gently. She turned to him, nodding. I never thought something good could come out of being afraid." Adam didn't reply right away. Then, with a half smile, "Fear's just a locked door. Sometimes it takes fire to find the key." That night, after the volunteers had gone home and the tools were silent, Adam stood in the empty garage with Evelyn beside him. The air smelled of wood and sweat and possibility. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked quietly. "Every day," he said. She looked at him. He shrugged. "Not like this. Not with you. But I always knew I'd end up rebuilding something. I just thought it'd be a carburetor." She laughed, that soft, tired laugh of someone who hadn't realized how much they needed to laugh. Their eyes met. And for the first time, neither of them looked away. Not yet a kiss, but not far from one either. Just trust. And the beginning of something deeper. In the dark outside, a single camera light blinked red above the door, active recording. Let them come. Let them watch. Because this time, the fire hadn't destroyed the garage. It had revealed the foundation. And that foundation was stronger than fear. The day the arrests were made, it was snowing again. Slow, thick flakes that floated like falling feathers, softening the hard edges of everything. But nothing could soften the look in Adam Walker's eyes as he stood at the edge of the newly rebuilt garage and watched two unmarked black sedans pull into the lot. Sheriff Doyle stepped out of the first car, flanked by two state investigators. He looked calm, but purposeful. Adam nodded once. "You found them?" Doyle adjusted his hat. "More than found. We have surveillance footage, clear shots of two men placing accelerant near the propane tank. Same men from the diner. Same men linked to Roth's other accidents." He paused, then added, "You were right to install those extra cameras." Adam's jaw tightened, but he didn't say I wasn't installing them for the shop. I was installing them for Clara. Instead, he asked, "What now?" "We bring them in. The DA's office is involved now." Evelyn's security team handed over a file. This thick, he held his fingers apart, linking Roth to multiple intimidation cases. Looks like his luck just ran out. Adam folded his arms, nodding slowly. Good. Careful what you call good, son, Doyle said quietly. He's a cornered animal now. Adam's eyes didn't waver. So am I. By midday, the arrests were headline news. Breaking Heart Motors, rival. Linked to violent sabotage attempt, Maple Ridge mechanic, key witness. For the first time in his life, Adam Walker's name was in bold letters on national news, and not for military service. Reporters began calling the garage. Evelyn's team handled most of it, but Adam agreed to one brief statement. Standing in front of the shop with Clara holding his hand, and Evelyn standing just behind him, he looked into the camera and said, "This isn't just about business. It's about standing up for what's right, even when no one's looking. My name isn't important, but what we're building here. That is, this is a place for second chances, for veterans, for young people, for anyone who's been told they're too broken to try again. We're not going anywhere, and neither is the truth." That night, the phones rang off the hook. Veterans from across the state called to ask about the training program. Local businesses offered donations. And perhaps most surprising of all, Evelyn's board of directors, notoriously cautious, issued a rare public endorsement of her decision to back Adam's garage as the first Heart Motors community anchor site. It was official. The project had moved from possibility to blueprint, and at the heart of it stood a man in a flannel shirt, a little girl with marker on her cheeks, and a woman who had once been told she wasn't tough enough to lead. But not all calls were from strangers. Late in the evening, after Clara had gone to bed, and Evelyn had lingered behind to review new architectural plans, Adam's cell phone buzzed. The number was blocked. He answered anyway. "Walker." A familiar voice slithered through the speaker like oil over gravel. "You think you've won," the man said. Adam's spine straightened. "You think exposing me changes anything?" Roth hissed. "I own half the state. You're just a dirt-under-the-nails grease monkey playing house with a corporate heiress." Adam didn't flinch. "No, I'm a father, and I'm a builder. And your biggest mistake was thinking men like me don't matter." A pause. Then Roth's voice, sharper. "You're on borrowed time, Walker. People like you burn fast." Adam's voice dropped low. "The last man who tried to burn me down is watching his empire crumble from a holding cell." Click. The line went dead. Adam put the phone down and turned. Evelyn stood at the doorway to the office, eyes wide. She had heard every word. He gave her a half smile. "You okay?" She stepped closer, her voice quieter than usual. "You're still willing to keep going, even with him out there?" He looked her straight in the eye, especially with him out there. Evelyn exhaled long and slow. "I don't know if I've ever met someone like you, Adam." He walked over to her, stopping just inches away. "You have now." And for a moment they just stood there, not speaking, not needing to two people who had both lost and rebuilt, and now stood on a foundation stronger than fear. 2 days later, the official signing ceremony took place in the newly refurbished garage. A large white banner hung above the front bay doors, Heart Motors Veteran Partnership, Maple Ridge Launch Site. Evelyn stood at the front with the mayor flanked by Adam and a small group of veterans who had flown in from around the country. Clara sat front row in a folding chair with a sign she'd made that read, "My Daddy Fixes Engines and Hearts." When Evelyn approached the podium, she didn't use a teleprompter. She simply said, "This project was born not from strategy but from kindness. A father stepped in to protect a stranger. A little girl asked a question that reminded us what really matters. And because of that moment, that spark, we're here today. Not to celebrate money, but to celebrate meaning. We're building more than garages. We're building bridges." Applause thundered through the crowd. When it was Adam's turn, he kept it short. You don't have to be rich or powerful to make a difference. You just have to show up. That's what this garage will do every day. For every person who walks through that door. After the ceremony, reporters swarmed, but Adam broke away and found Clara near the snack table trying to smuggle extra cookies into her coat pocket. He laughed. "Hey, partner, save some for the guests." She looked up and grinned. "I'm just being hospitable." He scooped her up and kissed the top of her head. "You're the best part of this whole thing, you know." That Clara nodded solemnly. I already knew. From a few feet away, Evelyn watched them. Then she took a step forward. And for the first time with no press, watching, no spotlight, no contracts. She slipped her hand into Adam's, not as a CEO, not as a guest, but as someone who believed in them. The snow had begun to melt. It left behind slush in the streets, muddy footprints near the garage doors, and the faint scent of thawing earth, but it also brought something else possibility. Spring was still weeks away, but the town of Maple Ridge already felt different, lighter, awake, and so did Adam. The garage was bustling now. What used to be a two-person operation had grown into a small team, 3 veterans in training, a young single mom learning diagnostics, and even an ex-high school shop teacher who'd lost his job during budget cuts. They came not just to work, but to belong. Each day, Clara would greet the team with a new drawing or a small cookie bag labeled Fuel for Heroes. She had become the unofficial mascot of the garage part, joy part, glue part, moral compass. If Clara liked you, you stayed. And Evelyn. She came by often. At first, it had been daily check-ins on progress, then meetings, then less official things like dropping off lunch or helping Clara plant the first seed trays for her garage garden. But lately, Adam had noticed something else in her visits. She no longer came with folders and contracts. She came with laughter and stories, and a look in her eyes that lingered a little longer every time he caught her watching him from across the room. It was Friday evening when Evelyn suggested they take Clara to the lake. "Just us," she said. "No business, no pressure, just people." Adam hesitated. "You mean like a family outing?" Her smile was soft, uncertain. "I mean, if that's what it feels like." He looked at Clara, who was already pulling on her boots. "Well, he said you'd better like marshmallows." They drove to Old Hollow Lake in Adam's rusted pickup, Clara in the middle seat, Evelyn squeezed up next to the window, trying not to laugh at the lack of shocks. The radio played old country songs, and the windows fogged up with laughter and hot cocoa steam. At the lake, they built a small campfire, roasted marshmallows, and told stories as the sun dipped behind the pines. Clara fell asleep, first her head resting on Evelyn's lap, a marshmallow still stuck to her cheek. Adam leaned back on his hands, watching the sky turn purple and silver. "You ever think we'd end up here?" he asked. Evelyn looked down at Clara, then up at him. "Not even in my wildest dreams." He smiled, then said quietly, "You know, when Angie died, I promised myself I wouldn't love anyone again. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't think I could survive losing someone twice." Evelyn's eyes were gentle. "That's not weakness, Adam. That's being human." He looked at her. "But then you showed up. And I didn't even notice it at first, the way you walked in like a storm, but stayed like a sunrise." Her breath caught. I thought I was protecting Clara by keeping life small, safe. But you reminded me that sometimes the biggest risk is not risking anything at all. She didn't speak. She just reached over her fingers, brushing his hand. He didn't pull away. Later that night, back at the cabin, Clara was tucked into bed, and Evelyn lingered in the doorway with her coat draped over her arm. Neither wanted to say goodbye. "I should go," she said. Adam stepped closer. "You could stay a while longer." Her eyes searched his. "Are you sure I'm tired of being afraid of "What ifs," he said. "What if it works out? What if we're exactly what we both need?" Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, and in the stillness between them, between fear and hope, past and present, he kissed her. It wasn't rushed or wild. It was true, a promise whispered in the quiet. The days that followed felt like the gentle unfolding of something long awaited. They didn't rush. They didn't announce it to the world. But those who knew them best, Clara Sheriff Doyle, even Maggie the waitress at Maple Diner, saw it in the way they looked at each other. Respect, warmth, and a deep, hard-earned trust. Evelyn shared stories of her childhood, of a father who taught her engines, and a mother who taught her expectations. Of lonely boardrooms and nights where all she wanted was for someone to ask how she was without an agenda. Adam shared stories of his deployments, of what he'd seen, what he still dreamed about, and how it was Clara's first laugh after Angie died that reminded him the world was still worth waking up to. And slowly, story by story, they began to rebuild the kind of closeness that only comes from shared pain and shared healing. One evening, Evelyn found a dusty box in the corner of the garage. Inside were photos of Adam in uniform, Angie holding baby Clara, old letters, and a medal tucked into a folded flag. She looked up at him. "You never talk about your service." "I try not to lead with it," he said. "I don't want people to see a Marine before they see a man." She touched the edge of the frame. "I see both." He swallowed hard. I want Clara to know all of it, not just the quiet version." "She deserves the whole story," Evelyn said. "So do you." By the time the first daffodils broke through the earth behind the garage, the town knew that something special had bloomed right alongside them. Not a whirlwind romance, not a fairy tale, but something better, a life rebuilt. A woman learning she could lead without losing her softness, a man learning he could love again without fear, and a little girl who believed cookies and crayons could fix the world, and maybe she was right. The grand opening of the new garage felt more like a community fair than a corporate event. Children chased balloons across the lot. An Army veteran-turned-barber gave free haircuts under a pop-up tent. Tables were stacked with pies and slow-cooked chili brought in by neighbors. Even Sheriff Doyle manned the grill in an apron that read, "Lawfully delicious." But in the center of it all stood the true transformation, Walker and Hart Veteran Service Center. No longer just a modest two-bay repair shop, the garage now boasted 6 full-service bays, a tech training annex with brand-new computers, a community classroom for evening workshops, and behind it all, Clara's dream come true, a garden filled with raised beds and wildflowers. A handmade wooden sign read, "Clara's Garden Growing Hope." Adam stood under the awning watching it all. His work boots were dusted with sawdust and pollen, his flannel sleeves rolled up to the elbows, and his heart for the first time in years was light. Evelyn approached from the side holding 2 lemonade cups and wearing jeans and a soft blue blouse that danced in the breeze. She handed him a cup and nudged her shoulder against his. "It's happening," she said. He nodded. "It really is." They stood in companionable silence for a while, just watching. Clara was helping an older woman plant tulip bulbs, her tiny hands buried in dirt, her pigtails bouncing as she explained the science of sunflowers. Evelyn smiled. "Do you know how rare this is?" What Adam asked. "This," she said, gesturing around. "A corporate initiative that actually means something. That started with a moment, not a memo. I've pitched hundreds of programs in boardrooms, but none of them had this kind of soul." Adam looked down at her. "That's because this one had Clara's crayons on the blueprint." They both laughed, the easy kind of laugh that only comes after surviving the hard. Later that afternoon, a small ceremony was held under a makeshift stage, built from old pallets and fresh painted wood. Evelyn was first to speak, thanking the town, the volunteers, the veterans, and especially Clara, whose question changed the course of all our lives. Clara shyly hid her face in Adam's leg, her cheeks red as the crowd clapped. Then it was Adam's turn. He stood with a quiet presence, the microphone almost unnecessary, given the hush that fell over the crowd. "I don't have a prepared speech," he said. "Never been much for podiums. But I do know what it means to fix things that are broken. Engines, homes, people." He paused, scanning the familiar faces, old classmates, fellow Marines, strangers who had become neighbors, and Evelyn standing just off stage, hands folded at her waist. "When my wife passed, I didn't think I had anything left to give." Adam continued. "I was wrong. Clara reminded me of that every day. And then one night at a diner, she asked a question, a small one. Just 6 words. He looked down at his daughter. "Daddy, can we help her?" He turned back to the crowd. That question changed everything. It reminded me that our greatest strength isn't in what we build with our hands, but what we're willing to build with our hearts. A long moment of silence followed, not the awkward kind, but the reverent kind, where no one wanted to break the moment. Then came applause. Long, genuine, grounded. The kind that wasn't just for a ribbon cutting, but for a life reclaimed. The weeks that followed brought more than recognition. Applications poured in from veterans across the country, some with spotless resumes, others with records and regrets, but a hunger to rebuild. Adam interviewed each one personally. He didn't care where they'd been. He cared why they wanted to come. One of them, a quiet man named Luis, said simply, "Because I want my daughter to be proud of me again." Adam hired him on the spot. Clara made him a drawing his first day, best mechanic in the universe. It hung in Luis's locker like a badge of honor. The town began to change, too. What had once been a sleepy roadside stop was now a place of motion, not fast, but full. A new cafe opened across from the garage. A community board was erected outside the post office, posting everything from job listings to lost dogs to Clara's weekly joke of the day. Even the high school partnered with the center to create a summer youth program where teens could learn real trade skills and earn credit. One boy, once labeled a troublemaker, built a functioning go-kart in 4 weeks and later told Adam, "This is the first time someone let me finish something." And Adam, he became the kind of man people turned to not for perfection, but for steadiness, for decency, for guidance. But he was also something else now. He was happy. Genuinely, quietly, unshakably happy. He and Evelyn didn't rush into anything dramatic. No big declarations. No whirlwind romance made for the movies. But she started staying later, leaving a jacket in the mudroom, bringing books over for Clara to read at bedtime. And once when Clara fell asleep watching a movie, Evelyn curled up beside her, and Adam sat across from them, his heart so full he didn't dare speak. One evening, as they sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the trees, Evelyn broke the silence. "My board wants to franchise this model," she said. "Take it national." Adam didn't look surprised. I figured that was coming. "They want me to lead it." He turned to her, now catching something in her tone. "But I won't do it," she said softly, "unless you're beside me." He stared at her, not startled, but moved. "I'm not a CEO," he said. "No," she said, smiling. "You're better. You're the reason this worked." He took her hand, then not with urgency but with quiet certainty. "We'll build it," he said. "Not for headlines, for people." She nodded, eyes glistening. Together, together. The stars came out one by one, tiny lanterns against the indigo sky. Inside, Clara laughed at something on TV. Somewhere, a car engine purred. And on the porch of a small cabin in a small town that had witnessed something remarkable, 2 people sat, shoulder to shoulder, not chasing a future, but creating one. Exactly 1 year after that quiet night at Maple Diner, the night Adam Walker stood up for a stranger and changed the course of 3 lives. 3 Rolls-Royce Phantoms returned to Maple Ridge. This time, they didn't arrive under cover of tension or threat. This time, they carried hope. Adam stood outside the garage as the trio of gleaming vehicles rolled into the newly paved lot, their polished hoods reflecting the clear spring sky. He wore a clean gray button-down, tucked into his work jeans, sleeves rolled up grease on his forearm like a badge of honor. Clara, now 5 and a half, stood beside him in her pink work apron that read, "Assistant Boss." Her hair was in 2 neat braids, and she clutched a bouquet of dandelions and baby's breath she'd picked that morning. As the car doors opened, a small crowd gathered. Local residents, veterans from across the state, apprentices, volunteers, and even the mayor lined the sidewalk with quiet curiosity. Out stepped 3 sharply dressed men and women executives from Hart Motors' national board. Behind them, Evelyn emerged. She was radiant, not in diamonds or glamour, but in purpose. She wore a cream blazer, dark jeans, and a confidence that seemed to echo from the ground up. But when her eyes found Adam and Clara, her posture softened instantly. Clara ran into her arms with the force of a cannonball. "You came," Clara beamed. Evelyn smiled, crouching to Clara's level. "Of course I came. Someone told me this garage has the best cookies and the strongest hugs in the whole state." Clara grinned. "We added lemonade too." "Well then," Evelyn said, standing and turning to Adam. "How could I possibly stay away?" He stepped forward, shaking the hands of the visiting executives, but his gaze rested on Evelyn. "You look different." She tilted her head. "Is that a compliment or a concern?" "A little of both," he said, smiling. "You've got that CEO fire in your eyes again. And I've missed you." Her eyes softened. "I've missed this. All of it." The board members spent the afternoon touring the garage, visiting the training annex, and interviewing several veterans enrolled in the program. The mood was buoyant, sincere. Even the suits, polished and skeptical at first, cracked into genuine admiration. "This place," one of them whispered to Evelyn, "doesn't feel like a business. It feels like a family." Evelyn nodded. "That's because it is." By the time the final presentations wrapped up in the classroom, it was clear the pilot had exceeded every expectation. Hart Motors would expand the model. 10 sites, then 20. A national blueprint for veteran-led, community-based service centers. But it would all begin here. Right here. At the garage, rebuilt from a single moment of kindness. That evening, as the crowd trickled out and the sun dipped low behind the ridgeline, Adam and Evelyn sat on the tailgate of his truck, watching Clara draw chalk hearts across the parking lot. Evelyn leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ever think about how far we've come all the time?" Adam said. "I mean, think about it. A year ago, you were just a mechanic trying to protect his daughter. I was a CEO walking into a diner I almost never should have been in. And Clara..." She looked over at the little girl, now instructing a teenager how to draw a unicorn. She was the real hero. Adam nodded slowly. "She saved both of us." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that doesn't ask to be filled. Then Evelyn spoke, voice quiet and sure. "I love this town. I love this garage. And I think I love you too." Adam turned to her. His hand found hers, rough calluses meeting soft fingers. "I've loved you longer than I was willing to admit." She smiled, that same soft smile she wore that first morning. She showed up with 3 Rolls-Royce and turned his world upside down. "You ready for what comes next?" she asked. "Not at all," he said. "But I'm not afraid of it anymore." The following week, a modest envelope arrived in the mailbox. It contained a handwritten note from a woman in Vermont, a war widow raising 2 boys inspired by the garage's story. Inside was a check for $50 and a note. I don't have much, but please use this to help someone like you helped her. Thank you for reminding me that people still care." Adam stared at the letter for a long time, heart full. The ripple was still moving. By midsummer, Walker and Hart had hired 7 new veterans. The garden out back bloomed in full color. Clara started reading aloud during weekly community story hours. And on the front wall of the garage, mounted in a handmade frame carved from reclaimed cedar, hung a plaque. This place was built on a question. "Daddy, can we help her?" Let the answer always be yes. 1 year. 1 question. And now a future they never could have imagined. That night, as twilight settled over Maple Ridge and the stars began to stitch themselves into the sky, Adam sat on the front porch, with Evelyn and Clara nestled between them. They didn't talk much. They didn't have to. Because sometimes the quiet speaks loudest. And sometimes the smallest moments, a question in a diner, a drawing by a child, a hand reaching out in the dark, become the foundation of a life you never dared to dream. Kindness doesn't always make noise, but it always makes waves. Where are you watching from? We'd love to know what part of the world you're tuning in from. Feel free to share in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to Soul Moments Story for more uplifting tales of kindness, courage, and second chances. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We truly appreciate you.